Right, welcome to Mr. Butler's Learning Conservatory. Final one of the exam season. How to prepare for paper 2. Now, again, past papers, best place to go is this website here. They've organised them really well. I managed to navigate AQA's downloading system. Right, the key thing again is seeing the whole paper and thinking very carefully about the actual name of the paper. It's writers' viewpoints and perspectives. They're two very different things, and it'll be quite obvious when you look at the whole paper how it's all tied together. The words they used when they launched this GCSE was that this paper, and particularly question 4, is the culmination of your English study from reception all the way to year 11, and therefore it is the hardest. So the different skills you are going to bring in of analysis, inference, explanation, your reading ability, and then writing to a set remit, and making sure you think about purpose and audience is all tied into this paper. So first thing, you need to read the whole question paper, and I'm using, so maybe I should have said at the start, I'm going to be using the June 2020 paper, the one with the mountaineering extracts, which you can find. I will try and attach to the bottom of the video. And if you look at the inserts, they are from Touching the Void, a very famous book by Joe Simpson, who has suffered a horrific injury and was dragged down by his mate and survived. And the second one is, obviously, because that's the modern one, you have one written in the 1900s. At the very end of the 1900s, 1899, you have Gertrude Bell, who went up the Alps. So obviously they're both about going up a mountain, but one's written in 1899 and one is written in one era. So you immediately have that distinguishing feature that in the old days things are very different. So if you read the questions, which maybe we should do that first. Sorry, it is obviously very, very warm. So the first question is true or false. The key, I'm not going to go over that too much, but the key to that is you read all the statements, because they are likely to be at the bottom, because they are trying to make you read all of it. If you think that the 4 true statements are the first 4, which they could be, I would double check that, because there is a chance they are probably not. And if you just read these before you even read the insert, the climbers were sheltered from the wind, the glacier was higher up the mountain, they'd been on the mountain at least 5 days, base camp was more than 3,000 feet, climbers were feeling more positive, they were overwhelmed by despair. Even before you've read the insert, well, these are climbers having a bad time, so that's what it tells you. Question 2, both writers are accompanied by another person. You use details from both sources to write a summary of what you understand about the differences between the two companions. So you know there is a focus in the questions to try and make you talk about Simon and Marius. So the companions are obviously important. They're not doing this alone. Question 3, obviously you know what you're going to get. It's going to be a language question about a specific bit, but it mentions feelings. So obviously there's an extreme event or extreme situation that is going to cause extreme feelings, otherwise there won't be anything to write about. And then question 4 is always going to be pretty similar, but compare how the writers convey their different feelings and perspectives on their adventures in the mountains. So you know that they are going to be different. So they're going to have different experiences, and the way they talk about them will therefore be different. And then look at question 5. Always look at question 5 before you start the reading, because as you're doing the reading sections, you should be getting ideas for this. And also, question 5 is probably going to give you a few clues as to what the focus is in the reading section. People have become obsessed with travelling ever further and faster. However, travel is expensive, dangerous and damaging, and a foolish waste of time. Write an article for a news website in which you argue your point of view on a statement. Right, so we're talking about a very real issue at the moment, is that the planet is obviously getting smaller in some ways, but we are damaging it in many other ways. So is it selfish to go travelling and cause damage, or is it is it something people should be able to do? Now obviously you already know that there's a bad situation in the one article, so maybe you should be judging them on that. And the woman climbing the Alps in 1899 at the time would have been quite an extreme thing to do for many reasons. A, the gender issue of a woman explorer, but also it wasn't easy to travel and to climb and explore because of the equipment and things like that. So you've got a bit of an insight into arguably what the viewpoints and perspectives are. So if we go back to the PowerPoint, so you've been directed to the key elements of setting and character. You've got people in an extreme situation. So that is going to be integral to it. Question 2, it's asking you to look at the companions. So they are going to be an essential part of it. The feelings, because there's going to be a built-in extreme situation. And then question 9, it's the focus is on the feelings. So you're going to be talking about the fact, is it an adventure or is it something more extreme? There is danger implied. The perspective, you know, how was exploration like in the modern day to the olden days, and those differences are key to it. And then question 5 again is almost focusing on that dangerous, exciting element of it. So dangerous and exciting are going to be 2 key words. So what can it teach you? The people in a precarious situation, and it's about location. It's that spatial awareness of where they are is dangerous, and it's also perilous, the situational experience they're having. So their predicament is perilous. So you've got location and situational, so where they are and what's happened to them there. The companions are important. It's implying it's hard to do alone. So I've got slight rain pause to get the washing in. Right, question 3. You've got the impression that there's going to be dramatic or exhilarating events, so you know that extreme feeling is going to be involved. So you're going to be looking out for emotive language, possibly sort of metaphorical, figurative devices that get across how bad it is. Question 4. You know you're going to have a difference in time. The perspective is going to be shaped through a variety of things, whether that be time, gender, age, race, cultural backgrounds maybe, and it's about exploration. So you should already have the sort of general awareness that exploring in the old days is harder than nowadays. However, the caveat, nowadays we can get to more extreme places because of the equipment. And then number 5, the key words, expensive. So you should be thinking about the elitist aspect of it, that people are spending a lot of money to do these exciting trips. They're dangerous. So what sort of people do dangerous things? And thrill seekers, adrenaline junkies, and damaging. So obviously like careless, unaware, maybe not even bothered by what they're doing. You know, infamously, and Antarctic tourism is now being curtailed because people are worried about the damage. And the word foolish is used. Now the word foolish is quite a good catch-all for a range of things, but you've got obviously the fact that these things can be potentially fatal and also egotistical. Why would you do something stupid unless it's because your ego says it won't affect you, you won't be hurt, etc. Right, question 1. You can pause the screen. Oh look, 2 of the last 8 are true because they want you to read them all. They want you to work your way through it. I'm not going to talk you through that. You can look at the mark scheme I've attached. It's fairly obvious which of the 4 that are true. Obviously, some of them, if I get the paper up, you can see that question 1 directs you to certain lines. That's 1 to 4. You look at 1 to 4. The coal was exposed and windy. Straight away, it's obviously not going to be A, right? Because the actual place they're in is exposed and windy. Now, obviously, we're trying to get you there to do the inference that it's talking about where they are. It doesn't specifically say they are, but it's implied. Directly beneath a glacier we had walked up 5 days ago, curved away towards the crevices which led to base camp nearly 3,000 feet below us. So obviously, you know, that D is false, right? And that's about close reading. They've given you the phrase 3,000 feet. Some people that don't read closely are going to immediately see that and think, oh, I've just read 3,000 feet, it must be true. So this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to see how closely you can read. So I'm not trying to catch you out as such, but they're trying to make sure that you are reading carefully and closely and with insight. So, true or false is fairly straightforward. Now, when we get to question 2, we have a real problem with question 2 in that most students overthink it or completely misunderstand what they're meant to do. A summary. A summary is purely to test, can you infer? Can you read between the lines? Do you understand what is going on in your own words? And it's about the two companions. So again, the focus is away from the main narrator, the main person voicing the piece, and it's about the people they're describing. And obviously, and these people are helping them in various capacities for various reasons. So if a good plan is to do a very brief table, because remember time is of the essence, and just try and maybe sum up in your own words about those people in your own words, and then you're going to write that out in full, and that'll be your answer. And if you look at the implication or the inference, obviously Marius is an employee and Simon is a friend, and one has mountaineering experience and one has local knowledge. There's a sense of life and death and trust, that these people are reliant on those people. Now, Joe is lucky that he fully trusts him as an old friend, and Gertrude is fully trusting in Marius because of his experience, and he has been employed obviously for what he's able to do. So the main difference is Simon's his friend and Marius is a paid guide, so he's waiting on him. We get that sense. She describes him doing that. So Simon is more of a partner rather than an employee. Simon's sharing in the same experience, doing it together, whereas Marius is confident, he's full of local knowledge, this is what he does. He's probably done this quite a number of times, so he will not be as excited as her, so he's very professional about it. The fact that is all built up about Simon, but then he's still letting him suffer in pain, that must mean that they have no choice. Whereas Marius is just very calm, his professionalism comes through. Simon is very cheerful, he's obviously doing it for a reason, he's trying to keep his spirits up, and in source B, you get a sense that he's using his strength and his expertise and his knowledge to sort out the situation. And then the last one, I think, just sums up their attitude. And to it is like Simon's full of infectious enthusiasm, whereas Marius is very much his professional, sticking to his job. Inside to him, he is being paid to do this because he is good at it. And it's raining, which makes this the noisiest room on earth. Right, I will persevere because the rain's meant to be here for a while and I want to get this done. Right, question 2. The bullet point bit I'll put on the slide is the top band exemplar response that AQA say is good. Again, I would want something else at the start, just a very brief introduction to your answer that shows, yes, you understand this, you appreciate there is a fundamental difference between the two extracts, particularly between the companions. So, the bit I've added. Both companions are essential for Joe and Gertrude's success and very survival. However, they're there for very different reasons. That's a typo. Right, I'm going to pause it because of the rain and amend the typo. Right, I'll try again. So, both companions are essential for Joe and Gertrude's success and very survival. However, they are there for very different reasons. Simon have a deep and irresistible friendship. Marius out of a sense of obligation as a hired help. And that is the key, is the fundamental difference. And then the rest of it, you can go through and talk about the differences. There's no analysis. There's no comparison. It's that summary and synthesization. So as you can see, in source B, the local guide is hired and therefore paid to ensure the safety and success of the writer. There's no analysis of the word hired. It's just I'm showing the inference, you know what that means. So he buys his experience and knowledge on the mountains to achieve ambition. On the other hand, in source A, Joe's companion is involved in a partnership which suggests the mutual respect, skill and collaboration. So it's the implication of the words, not the writer has chosen the word hired to show that he's being paid for it, so he doesn't really care. It's subtle and it's hard to pick up, but if you look at a few past papers and you look at the exemplar answer in the mark scheme, you'll see the pattern and you'll get used to it. And they're saying the main differences are the relationship, which I've gone over, their actions. Obviously what Simon does is quite extreme, is born out of desperation. Their experience, obviously Simon you presume has the same experience as him, whereas Marius doesn't. Their knowledge, obviously Marius has done that climb many times, whereas Simon you presume has done it the same amount of times as Joe, and the same with the other things. Right then, question 3, the language one. Now this is obviously with 12 marks. It's the last sort of language specific question you're going to do in your GCSEs. And again, a quick plan is just think of the overview. So what is the summation of the language and techniques? The fact that he's scared, terrified, sickened, increasingly desperate. All those things are conveyed through the language use, and then you just explain how you got to these. Again, the exam board have written this. The writer uses a metaphor, flare of agony, to help the reader visualise the pain. But I still think you need just this opening little sentence. Simon uses language in an evocative and terrifying way to express just how desperate and harrowing his situation is and the depth of his despair. Just that brief overview of what the writer is doing, and then you go into the analysis of how the language helps him achieve that. And this is a really good model for it. So you name the technique, you've used integrated quotation, the flare of agony, and then you explain the effect, so it helps the reader visualise the pain. He feels as something physical, even violence. That's that secondary explanation where you're really explaining it fully. The word flare, so you've gone back into the quotation you've used, and now you're going into what they call word specific analysis. So you really like that really granular detail. The word flare conjures up an explosive image of leaping flames, as if his leg is literally on fire. And most people would stop there, but this extra bit suggests the intense sudden pain he feels each time his leg is jolted. Just you're really going into the detail of why that metaphor is so powerful, because those words have so many connotations. And there was plenty to talk about. A wave of nausea, flare of agony. You've got the personification, almost as if they've been attacked by nature. So, you know, like nature is forcing them off the mountain. All the violent verbs to really get across the violence of what they're having to do. Because normally, if you're that injured, you just wait for help. Snagged, kinked, gritted, shear, twist. The sickening, gristly crunch, that onomatopoeia is so grim and so effective. Repetition, rule of 3, and the adverbs are very much adding to the whole sense of the drama of it. So there's plenty to talk about. Question 4. It is the last reading question everyone in the country does as part of their compulsory education, and that's how they see it. They see it as a test of all the skills you've ever learned, the comparison skills, the analysis skills, the reading skills. So it will be tricky, but perfectly accessible. So the key words are feelings and perspectives. It's basically the feelings are what they think, perspectives, why they think it. You know, what is it about a particular situation or the circumstances that shape their feelings and viewpoints. So remember, viewpoint is basically how you feel, perspective is why you feel it. He is up a mountain with his friend. He's in a bad way. She is on an adventure with a very experienced local guide, so she will feel a certain way. She's a woman, but she's entrusted this local guide to help her. He is an experienced mountaineer, but he's got his equally experienced friend with him, so they both are in a certain place through confidence. In terms of the differences, it's always going to come down in this paper to time. Normally times things are different in the old days. Gender experiences are different for each genders, particularly in Victorian times. Age, old people, young people. Ethnicity, nationality, religion, and it could be other things, but it'll mainly be the first three. Right, and the AO4, the content. Ignore that. AO3. So AO3, it's what are you comparing? Obviously, Simon and Joe seem quite experienced. You can tell that from what they do. They seem to and do the right things at the right time. Her experience is a little bit vaguer, but the fact she's relying on the guide would hint that she's not as confident. Obviously, I would argue in the source B, she's enjoying it far more than they are in source A, but that's some circumstantial. The fact the suffering is extremely different. The success, again, is weird because it's implied you'll need to be able to access that obviously the success in A is just to survive. The success in B is the fact she's come back down to be able to write about it. And the methods, there are a lot, but some of the more subtle ones will be harder to access. So structural shifts, that is a method. A is very focused on coming down the mountain, on the almost logistics of it. It is breaking it down into detail and what they're doing. In source B, she's describing the whole day, so she gets to shift between different events. And it's a weird thing because it's implied it's a diary, and she's obviously writing it in the evening about that day. There's not as much sense of drama or danger, because obviously in A, you think it is a real account, so he must have survived to write it, but he might have written it halfway down the mountain in his diary and then it was found later, so there is still that element of jeopardy and peril. Structural viewpoint, obviously in source A is very descriptive, trying to get across how bad it was, whereas very reflective in source B because she's already completed it and she's sat there at a desk with a diary, which is a good one to think about in order to access the high band, is look at structural and features. If you're reflecting back on something, your memory is going to be shaped particularly by whether it's a success or not. Whereas in A, he's specifically trying to get across the drama of the occasion and how dramatic and dangerous it was. Remember that similarities are just as important as differences. They are mostly chronological because it's an account of something that's happened. Particularly if you get a diary or journal, you would expect it to be chronological. Although obviously the openings are very different for different reasons. Tone, you have to talk about tone in question 4 to get into the high band. And tone is picked up through the mood, the atmosphere, but also the narrative viewpoint. If there is sarcastic, which they've used a couple of times, a lot of children just don't get it. They just don't pick up that the writer is in on the joke or is in on the view. They just presume that is their viewpoint. So be careful for that. He is very dramatic and distressed because he thinks he's going to die. She's very cheerful, and it's all ironic because she's managed to do this thing. And then language features you can always talk about. So again, the exam board, I provided the stock answer, which starts from this bit. Then the fundamental difference between them. No, sorry, the writer and source A. I still think if you want the higher marks, you have to write a very astute introduction. And both writers explore and present the extreme nature of their experiences. However, they're not only very different experiences, but their attitudes to them are markedly different in their concern for the situation. Straight away, I'll tell them exam board, I get the difference, particularly in perspectives. The fundamental difference between them is not so much they're written in different formats. One, a graphic description of the climb up the mountain to convey the sheer horror, or let's just say climb down maybe, or descent, and the desperation of their experience. The other, a typical 19th century travel journal diary meant to record the events as much as emotion. Again, another typo there. So you get the feelings and the perspective summed up, and then you go into the detail. And this is what they are saying is the top band answer, and this is the second part, and obviously you can pause it whenever. So you've done the 4 reading questions. At about an hour's mark, I would make sure you're ready to do question 5, because you're going to need to plan it. Right, I'll do question 5 in a separate video because this has already gone too long. Just remember, read the whole paper first, think very carefully about what each question wants you to do.